What's the point of worship? What's the real reason that we come together to celebrate the Mass?
The goal is to look like Jesus. I really want to tell you what I've been trying to tell you for 2 days.
Mindfulness of audio levels.
Just give it some effort, would you?
There's something so beautiful to just remaining hidden in the heart of the Father.
If we've got to be exhausted, let's be exhausted for the kingdom.
We became Facebook friends.
I just want to tell people how awesome it is to be Catholic. There's so much freedom.
From St. Pius X Church in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is Roar Like the Lamb.
So it's been a couple weeks.
It's been a couple weeks.
You've had a busy couple weeks.
I've had a busy, well, I got to go on retreat, which was good. Nice to be away for a little bit and get that time. But I feel I'm feeling the couple weeks since we last recorded.
Feels kind of like weird.
Yeah, like I've seen you plenty, but it still feels kind of strange. We haven't had a chance to actually sit down and do this.
Right.
This is good. I'm glad we can do this.
Doesn't it feel like if you go a week without working out, it feels like you started all over again?
A week without working out.
Or a couple of weeks.
Do you know
in
how
my
many
case.
weeks I'm going without working out? Do you know how many weeks it's been?
I'm just saying. I was like, oh yeah, we got to get back into doing these weekly.
I can no longer count the weeks since I last worked out. No, it's just good. It's good to be able to do this and to get back. So I'm glad to be here. I'm happy about
Highlight
this.
from retreat.
Highlight from retreat. As I told the other priests that I was with, I did a retreat with the John Paul II Healing Center in Tallahassee, Florida. Dr. Bob Shukes and Sister Miriam James Heidland were just amazing. They were really, really fantastic to be with. But as I told the guys at the end of the retreat, the highlight for me was actually just the priestly fraternity. 20 priests who I had never met before except for one. There was Father Marvin, who's a Franciscan priest who I know. I've known him for a few years, and he was also on the retreat. I actually got really excited when I saw his name on the list. I was like, this is great. I know this guy. It's going to be awesome. But just sort of immediately connecting with other priests. I had a little layover in Atlanta, and when I got off the plane, I had a text from one of the staff members from the JP2 Center telling me that another one of the priests was going to be on the same flight as me coming into Florida. And so I just kind of kept an eye out. And sure enough, I saw this young priest walking by. And so I called out to him and we sat down, and he said, I was actually just looking for a place to get a beer. And I went, oh, this is great. This is great. I know where we can get one. Let's go get one. And so I had known him for like 4 minutes.
That's awesome.
And we went and we had a beer together.
You
We just talked. But it was great. There was sort of this instant ease, and it's something that I'm sure exists in other walks of life. I'm sure that people get together with like-minded fellows. That they get together with people who share their same profession and everything, and can kind of immediately connect.
Yeah.
But there's just something really special about in the priesthood meeting these guys and immediately feeling a sense of brotherhood and fraternity. And it was just really nice to have that time with these guys, even though they were all strangers. To be with them for that week and to know that I was among brothers and to be able to pray with them, to be able to share with them, and just sort of that ease of friendship and fellowship. That was, for me, that was the real highlight. There were a lot of other great graces and things that came, but I don't know if I'm going to talk about that on the podcast or not. Maybe someday.
Okay, that's fine.
Maybe we'll get to it.
I mean, you could share go-karting and watching Sister Miriam on a go-kart.
I saw Sister Miriam James Heidland on a go-kart.
I also got a video of it because he had to
for
share
the
it.
record. Just for the record, it exists. It happened. And look, I make jokes about abiding together as a podcast.
Sorry,
But
I just remember the text you sent me.
I need to make really clear that Sister Miriam is an incredible person, and the Lord is doing things through her.
Yeah.
In a powerful way to bring healing and consolation to so many people. But I didn't know until this week what an incredible heart she has for priests. And just how beautifully dedicated she is to ministering to priests and to challenging them, calling them, but really with a sister's heart, with a mother's heart, just guiding them. So she was amazing, and it was a great blessing to actually have some closer contact with her.
That's awesome.
You know, like I've seen her talks on videos and stuff, but to actually sit 3 feet away from her while she was talking, totally different experience. Totally different experience. And yes, she does cry. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Oh, wow. wow, this has really changed.
No, look, I'm still not going to start listening to Abiding Together because
no, I know, but
I
you
can't
always make a comment about them crying.
Well, because the crying, okay, after something, like, do we have to cry again?
Wow.
But
I feel like you softened up on that.
Well, the retreat softened me up a little bit on some of it. Some of it. There's still a part of me that just I can't.
I consider that progress.
There's progress, of course. Look, God is good, and He's going.
I mean, there's gifts of tears. Okay.
Absolutely, no question. I fully believe that.
And some people's gifts are just an everyday gift.
That's right.
So
that's a really good way to say it. Some people's gifts are just an everyday gift.
So if they have the gift of tears and it happens every day, like, okay.
All right. Now, what have you learned as you're reflecting in this last week on your years of ministry at a parish? You got to put some of those to work.
I did
in unexpected ways.
The best way. If someone asks me, what has the church taught you? Honestly, I can MacGyver any situation. That's what I've learned. I'm in adoration. Like my week, it wasn't as eventful as yours. By the time Father had come back, we were already resuming our adorations with young adults. And I was just excited to sit before Jesus. And I was like in it, like sometimes it takes me a little while to start getting into prayer. So I just kind of sit there and fiddle around. But like the moment I got into the church, I was like, oh man, I just need to sit there. And I was in the mood. I was like in my moment. And then one young adult comes up to me. She goes, Paula, this other young adult is having a situation in the bathroom. Now, we need your help with the toilet. Now, she's saying this, but is holding in the biggest laugh. But everybody's in adoration, and it's dead silent. So you just hear, my eyes were closed, and I just felt a presence come near me on my pew. And I was like, who is disturbing my personal space? And so by the time I get to the bathroom, it's funny because they wanted to be mentioned on this podcast, but I will not say their name because of the situation. But okay. So I get to the bathroom.
Is that weird that they wanted to be mentioned on the podcast because of the bathroom?
It's so funny. No.
Oh, they just want to be mentioned.
So like
it has nothing to do with this particular experience.
Last Friday we had a wine and cheese night with some young adults. It was great.
That sounds
And
awesome.
then they mentioned to me, these two people were like, hey, we're wondering when we're going to be mentioned on the podcast, my name. But then you have this situation happen on Tuesday. And now I'm wondering.
A toilet disaster.
A toilet disaster.
It's not necessarily the way that you want to make it onto Roar Like the
So
Lamb.
long story. This is why I'm not going to name them by name.
Good.
Okay, I'm saving that.
Okay.
So anyways, long story short, I get to the bathroom. It is an eternal flush. It just doesn't stop flushing. Thankfully, it was very clean. It just was spouting water. And this is like an industrial commercial toilet. So it's not like the one where at home, where the valve is and you turn it.
I don't think I've ever heard of a toilet described as industrial or commercial, but I think it's great. Good.
That's the only way this is not an at-home toilet, okay? Sure. This is very different.
Yep.
And I was like, well, you couldn't turn it off. I didn't know how to turn it off. Then I was trying to get a hold. So this is like 8:15, okay? Like I got 10 minutes in of adoration before I was disrupted. And then for the next 45 minutes, it was me trying to figure out how to turn this off. So I called our maintenance guy. I called our business manager. It took them a while to get to me because, it's their evening. They're probably getting ready for bed. And here I am. I'm like, Kim, do we have an emergency plumber for St. Pius? Like things that I legit thought we might have.
Right.
That we might need. We did it. She goes, no, Sandra isn't answering. And I was like, she goes, that's okay. Let me text my plumber. So she texts her personal plumber. And I just the whole evening is hilarious. So then they tell me I have to pull up this cap on the thing. And I was like, but where? So I did it incorrectly. When he said cap, I didn't get the picture from Kim, but Sandra was telling me. I thought it was the cap at the bottom of the toilet, but I pulled off the cap, but that was just a screw to keep the toilet in. And I was like, that's not the one that I need. So I had to go back up the pipe. The cap was on the pipe, but there's so many parts about this pipe. That's why I call it an industrial commercial toilet. There's too many things to this. So anyways, what saved it was I was told you need to get a flathead screw. There's no toolbox in this building. I didn't go all the way over there to Sandra's garage to go find one. So I had to use a butter knife to pull off a cap. Then I used the butter knife to turn the valve because you need a flathead screw to turn it off. It's not really by hand. But then the butter knife was shaving away at the metal. So I was like, no, what's going to happen? So then I remembered a wine opener. Okay. So I went to the kitchen. The wine opener has this end that's perfectly suited, like a fathead screw.
A fathead, yes.
A flathead screw.
Screwdriver.
And then screwdriver.
The screw is
right,
there.
right, a flathead screwdriver, and then was done. It was finished. I was a little wet. I laughed. We made it right before benediction, and that is what I learned. I can do emergency plumbing at St. Pius using a butter knife and a wine opener.
Great. And the butter knife and the wine opener went directly back into the drawer, right?
No, they went into the trash. Because okay. So before I went back into adoration, I texted Father Sam and Father Silva, and I always said, hey, so this is what my night was tonight. And both of them praised me for being resourceful. But then how to make sure to tell me specifically, make sure you throw it out and don't wash it. So then I thought about this later. And I was thinking, we just know Paula enough that we have to make this statement, which I thought it was kind of funny. And I was like, you know what? That really would be me. I would take those tools that I had used, wash them, and put them back. But I don't know. I feel like you both foresaw something where let's.
No, we were just joking that you should just put them back in the drawer without ever washing them.
Oh, see, I was taking it as like.
Yeah. Oh no, we were just joking. Like, oh yeah, don't even bother washing it. It touched the toilet. Don't even bother washing it. You can wash it and put it back. It's like we can still use that.
Oh my gosh, I really thought you were telling me to throw it out.
No, if we want you to throw it out, we'll tell you to throw it out. It's not like you used it to like unclog the toilet.
Oh my
You used it to turn a screw. It's fine.
Yes, right. The world's best plumber award. Thank
you,
Chris.
You're amazing.
Oh yeah.
Well.
Yeah. So that's it. It's not
right.
as exciting and as.
No, but it's good. I'm glad that you've learned these other skills because it's one of those things that we just have to do. Good job. I'm proud of you. Very proud of you.
Maybe I can find a whole spiritual analogy to this whole plumbing situation. I have some ideas, but I think I have to think about them a little bit more.
Why don't you take that to prayer? I want you to pray on that. And
no. It really was. It was joy. It was serving. Sure. As I was doing this, it was. I'm here to serve you guys. So though it took me away from adoration, which is what I wanted, a place to rest, sometimes you get called out of
that
prayer.
Place where you are.
That place where you are in order to have to serve to emergencies.
Sure.
So it really was I was thinking about this. I was praying through it as this was happening. I was like, you know what? I get to serve these two girls and the situation of the toilet. But I'd prefer to just be back in the chapel, but right now this is something that is still really good. And not to be annoyed at it,
right.
Things happen, so you just have to laugh through it.
It's a thing where the Lord just needs you to move in a different direction.
Yeah.
All good.
So either they're just extreme inconveniences or they're just opportunities to kind of serve the Lord elsewhere in a different way. So
nice.
Yeah. Oh, look, I didn't have to pray about it. I'm kidding. All right.
No, you should still pray about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's talk about mercy.
Mm-hmm.
Easy transition.
Fantastic.
Toilets to mercy. Here we go.
No, yes. Water, baptism, forgiveness, flushing down the drain, getting rid of your sins.
That's good. So I realized we talked about this topic, and I kind of only had one piece of the puzzle. And yesterday it struck me that we might actually have to do a couple episodes about this.
Okay.
We might have to talk about this a little bit more. So just to kind of lay the groundwork, what was on my heart, especially as we were coming up to Divine Mercy Sunday, was just coming to the awareness of how much the world needs God's mercy, and not just needs God's mercy, but how much we need to act on that mercy. So we need to demonstrate mercy. We need to give mercy. We need to be instruments of mercy in the world. And I was thinking about it kind of because of something that happened here in town, but also just a broader sense. There's a quote that was included in an article that Francis Cardinal George wrote years back. And he said that in American culture, almost everything is permitted, but there are many things that cannot be forgiven. Whereas in the church, there are many things that are not permitted, but everything can be forgiven. And in a world where everything is permitted, but nothing is forgiven, the world teaches us to take vengeance. The world teaches us to be angry. The world teaches us to be divided. But what the church is meant to be teaching the world is that forgiveness and mercy actually bring us back and rehabilitate us and bring us to where we need to be. Now, there's, I think, a lot that can flow from that, a lot of ideas that you can take from it. But where I was really drawn was to that idea that we are very much living in a time where mercy is not shown. We don't really demonstrate mercy. And where part of the result of living in a world where mercy is not frequently shown is we start to believe that we cannot receive mercy.
Ooh.
We start to believe that we're not good enough for mercy. So if you take something like cancel culture, somebody does something that's offensive, or somebody does something that the culture at large says cannot be allowed, and the move to get rid of them, the move to just push them out, the move to never allow them to do anything ever again is really strong.
Yeah.
But there's no move to say, let's try to bring them to a place where they're changed, where their behavior is transformed. Let's bring them to a place where they can be different. Whereas in the life of the church, the idea is to say, we need you to grow and we need you to get better. We want you to become more virtuous. Yes, what you've done, this sin, this particular action is wrong. And you need to apologize for it. You need to say that you're sorry. You need God's mercy. But at the same time, you need to be rehabilitated. You need to grow in this. So here in town, we had recently some boys at the high school, one of the high schools, I don't remember which one, got in trouble. Maybe it was both high schools. Got in a lot of trouble for doing something that was disgusting and wrong. But the response to it, the school, I think, handled it very well in terms of addressing it directly and taking disciplinary action. It was exactly the right thing that needed to be done. But the public response was all these horrible comments against their families and against the boys themselves. These are terrible families. Look at what you've done to your children. Look at the kinds of boys you're raising. These are the kinds of boys who grow up to be all these other things. And that was coming from adults, not other kids, not other students.
Mm-hmm.
There was a level of anger and hatred. But all I could look at was that these were children. They're high school students, and what they did was wrong. But what do we do when somebody does something wrong in school? What we should be doing is correcting them and teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of them being in school is to teach them how to be better. So let's take this awful thing that they did and make sure that they grow from it and learn from it and never do it again. And then that they also can be that influence that makes sure that nobody else around them ever does it again. But instead there was this move to say, nope, this defines them forever.
Mm-hmm.
This thing that they did in their immaturity and in their unawareness of how wrong it really is. They're children. Their brains haven't developed to the point where they can think through the full consequences of everything. That doesn't mean that they don't know the difference between right and wrong. They know the difference between right and wrong, but they can't think through all of those other things. Let's teach them why it's wrong. Let's teach them how they can do better, and let's teach them and hold them to account for that. Let's not excuse anything that they've done as though, oh, it's fine, it doesn't matter, it's just boys being boys. No, let's make sure they know what they did, but let's not write them off.
Right.
And that's what I saw happening. Now, that happens in our world constantly. And this is a local way that it happened. It's easy when it's a celebrity because you've got distance from them.
Right.
Like, this celebrity said something crazy and off-putting, or this public figure did something that cannot be tolerated. And that's why there's still such a thing as scandal in the world.
Right.
A politician does something wrong, it's scandalous because they're supposed to be a model for us, right? They're supposed to have that public persona. But this is one that was very local. But let's bring it even more personally. How many times, for me as a priest, do I find somebody in the confessional who is struggling to forgive themselves? They've done something and they think that whatever it is that they did defines them forever. This is the sin. This is me now. This is who and what I am, and I'm never going to recover. Or I just can't be forgiven. There's like a doubting of God's mercy. We need mercy in the world, and the world needs to learn mercy. And we need to learn what mercy really is. God's mercy is not like an excuse for everything that we ever do.
Right.
But we need to learn what mercy really and truly is. So that's where my mind is. It's been on my heart for a while now.
Yeah. It's so I was telling Father Sam, for those of us who are listening, because he was telling me that he wanted to do this podcast, and my friend is raising money to do a discipleship school for 6 months. So she just needs to raise enough funds to be able to spend the next 6 months being formed and being healed, is pretty much what she's doing. And in order to do that, so she's got to make some money. So she created these t-shirts, and the t-shirts say less canceling, more cultivating. And I really love that. And I've been mulling over because I've seen it now, seen the post for a couple of weeks now. And I saw it at first, but I'm really beginning to understand, like, whoa, this is really important, because in order to extend mercy, I need to take responsibility over my actions, but in the sense that I can reach out to the people around me to help form them and shape them. Like, I recognize you as like related to God the Father, like you're my brother and sister. I am responsible to be in relationship with you and to help form you. But when it's just, hey, you're done, I've completely, what do? You perpetuate this spirit of being orphaned and abandoned.
Yeah.
And that's so detrimental. And Sister Bethany Madonna and a lot of other people in church will say that's one of the greatest things that plagues first world countries is this feeling of abandonment, this feeling of feeling orphaned. And if we don't even have the space available to lead somebody into a redemption story or some form of reformation, because mercy happens, but with the follow-up and the intention that you're going to reform your life. When we've taken that away and just said, oh, I'm sorry, you're canceled, like that's it. Oh my gosh. I feel like it's almost taking that orphan spirit, and now it's like, you can kind of see it in a broader sense over America.
Sure.
Or over the world at the very least. But
the other part of that is it's not just about what I did today. It's about what I might have done years ago.
Right. And how so things are coming back, and people are.
And so what happens then is there's no credit given to me for any way that I have grown.
Yeah.
If I went back and I looked at stupid things that I said when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I would be very ashamed of most of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I'd like to think that I've grown since then, and I've grown up, and I'm better than I was.
Your brain is more formed.
Sure.
It wasn't
but also I'd like to say my own heart. I'd like to think that I'm more virtuous now than I was when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And that process of growth is to my credit.
I have a question.
There's a tendency in our culture right now to say, no, that doesn't matter. What matters is what you did, and that's it.
Right. So then the cancel culture gets tagged with accountability.
Mm-hmm.
How would you relate accountability with mercy?
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the best examples that I've ever had of accountability and mercy was the principal of Greenwich Catholic School when I was down there a few years back.
Okay.
Mrs. Copus, if a student was in trouble, if a student got in trouble, now this is pre-K through 8 school.
Okay.
So we're not talking about older kids. We're talking about little kids and young teenagers, very young teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
If a kid got in trouble for something, whatever it was, it didn't really matter. If a kid got in trouble, there was a consequence.
Yeah.
You did this, and so here is the consequence. And part of it always involved you have to apologize to the person that you hurt, the teacher that you talked back to, the other kids in your group who were affected by whatever. You have to apologize to them personally, and that was always a piece of it. Depending on how serious whatever they did was, there's also going to be some other punishment. You're going to lose recess, or you have to clean the tables in the cafeteria this week, every day that you're in there. There was some other consequence, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other thing that she often did was she said, and I'm going to arrange for a priest to come and hear your confession.
Oh.
And many times I would just be told there's a student who needs to see you for confession.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd set up a room so that I could go in and sit there, and the kid would come in to go to confession. And she said they need to understand that what they've done is wrong, and it impacts their school and their friends and their classmates and everything. But they also need to understand that it affects their relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to ask for God's forgiveness.
Mm.
But she taught them that God's forgiveness was always there for them, and that she would help them find it.
That's so beautiful.
What they knew, if a kid got in trouble, they knew that there was going to be a consequence, but they also knew that there was going to be help.
Yeah.
That they weren't just written off. So none of those students in that school, at least in my experience, none of those students ever felt like getting in trouble was the worst thing that could have happened. They always knew that they were still loved, they were still cared for, and that they still had a place. And the other students, the kids who didn't get in trouble, knew that they had a responsibility to accept the apology and to try to help the kids move on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's hard sometimes, and it took time, and kids have to deal with the consequences of a broken friendship or something like that. But they were learning what mercy looks like. So accountability means to say, what you've done is wrong. We live in a world that says you can't judge anyone, though. So when society says there's no judging, but then we judge like crazy, we are so judgmental, right? But we live in this world that says you can't judge anything because everything is permissible.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of saying that's wrong is equated with saying I am bad.
Yeah.
So if somebody tells me that my action has offended them in some way, what they're really telling me, according to society's norms, is that I am a bad person and I am personally being judged or put upon.
Yeah.
Accountability means to say that this is something this action, this thing it's wrong, and you need to know that. You need to be told. And sometimes we need to be told. Sometimes we don't know it by nature.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things like I need somebody to explain to me why this is bad.
Yeah.
Or why I can't do this, or why. You think about how this maybe gets exaggerated somewhat, but think of how vocabulary has changed over the years, just in like the last 4 years, and how certain things we can't say anymore. You get politically correct speech.
Yeah.
So it's no longer permissible to say certain things a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
There's new, better ways to say it and everything. And it's in the most positive way. It's trying to make people feel more comfortable, trying to eliminate the potential for words to harm.
Mm-hmm.
In the negative sense, it's then just exaggerating everything so that everything can somehow be offensive, and every word you can possibly use is bad somehow, and is an example of either cultural appropriation or cultural colonialism or sexism or racism or something else, ableism, whatever it is. Somehow whatever you said is bad. And just the fact that I said that means that I'm a judgmental, terrible person, right? That's how our world is working right now. Accountability says this is wrong. Yeah. Mercy says, in spite of the fact that you've done something that's wrong, I'm going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
I'm going to name the thing that you've done, and then I'm going to walk with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to walk with you, not allowing you to continue doing that thing, but telling you that in spite of the thing that you've done, I still love you.
Yeah.
But something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
Something has to change, and it has to change sooner rather than later.
Is that then like, I don't know if it's proper to use the word like dualistic, or like we're just separating how we approach the person, but even in our culture, how like we even separate like how we understand the human person. Like it's...
Yeah, I don't know if it's dualism.
Probably not.
But you're onto something there, because we have that tendency to separate out this action. This is all perfectly fine, but then anything that's said about it, there's a tendency, and then the tendency to separate persons from the rest of society.
Exactly.
And actually, I'm wondering if this has become more exaggerated in the pandemic time, where isolation has already happened. So people feeling more isolated then pay more attention to what's being said online, especially, and paying more attention to those things, then react to it. But because they don't have another person sitting across from them that they can talk to about it, because there's that sense of isolation, they're taking that offense and internalizing it even more and exaggerating it almost. So something that in conversation might just be a passing word that you don't even notice, because it's now on Twitter or whatever the social media part is, you're reading it and internalizing it and turning it over and over and over until you realize that somebody is offended by this, and then you jump on the bandwagon of being offended, and then in your own isolation you end up casting out this other person, forgetting almost that there's another person on the other side. So there's that separation. I think where the church steps in is to say, many things cannot be permitted, but all things can be forgiven, which is to say we want to draw you back.
Right.
And so we don't want a person to be isolated. We don't want someone to be cast out by what they've done. But at the same time, the very
like modern day leprosy.
Yeah, but the very act of what they've done, or what they are choosing to do, the very way that they're behaving, is in fact separating them.
Yeah.
it's separating them because they're not living authentically, or because they're not doing what they're supposed to. Their action doesn't correspond to God's plan.
So we're doing not Bible in a Year, but we're doing salvation history, and Focus is doing it through Curtis Martin and Edward Tree. So we have a group of people come every Thursday night for this salvation history. And as we're going through the material, there's a lot that I don't know. I'm like, man, I really need to like really study the Bible more. And I like salvation history, but I have an eagle eyes view.
The Bible in a Year podcast, Father Mike Schmitz.
Yeah, I'm on day 70. I'm sure we're at 90 something now at this point. Oh no, they've reached. Okay, see, I'm very behind. But one thing that I was really intrigued by when Edward Tree was talking about, I think this was after Noah and the flood, and he's talking about I love that he's connecting the lineages for you.
Yeah.
And he's explaining this. So to have the charts explained is very helpful. And at one point in the charts, you have the Canaanites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, like all these people. But what you know about these people is that these are the people that are the enemies of Israel. And what then Edward Tree was saying is like, okay, so these are people who are the enemies against Israel. They like enslave them. Like they're at war with them. It's a whole big mess. But he says, God's intention is to bring them back into full communion. Because at the beginning of the Bible, there was this oneness, and then sin came in. And then so you had a separation of family. You had a separation of relationships. And the Lord specifically chose one group of people to be the priestly people that would then invite the rest of the world into communion with God. And that, I didn't know that. Like, I mean, you know what? I didn't know that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so good, because can I see these people as my forever enemies? You can, but they're not supposed to be.
Right.
Like God has this intention of bringing people back. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, I don't know what you were saying. You were saying a lot of stuff. But
Paola listens very carefully to all the things that I say.
I do, but I have the memory of an 80-year-old, so it doesn't really help anybody.
She just can't help but sit at my feet and listen and learn.
You're not Jesus. Gosh. So I remember Father John Burns. You know him because you went to school with him.
I did.
And him and Sister Miriam were giving a talk at Seek. This was like 2011 when we were in Indianapolis. And he said that you cannot heal if you do not forgive. And he has a book on this. He has a book on forgiveness. But this culture is talking about accountability for the purpose of healing. But healing is being taken into this, like, I need to dish back what we as a community have received for centuries. And that's not like downplaying it. Like, you know, there's trauma that can continue through, because when you think of like your own identity, like, oh, like it can, like in the same way, I guess, when we think about generational curses and things like that, some of those things can be passed on. But here you have this invitation through the scriptures, through God, through mercy, saying, can you forgive? Because what makes it possible for the rest of the world to enter into communion with Israel, in order for them to enter in communion with God, is God's forgiveness. Right. God's forgiveness is the only thing that is able to reconcile and bring healing.
Right.
And to the extent that the community forgives, then you're going to have this healing. I was just thinking about it on a personal level, because this is, only reason I'm Father, like I talked about Father John Burns because I'm going to buy his book, because I need to kind of like dive into some areas of my life where, you know what, I need to do more forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I've been holding on to something. And I mean, I'm going to start therapy soon, so hopefully we talk about this more. But I was like, yeah, I feel like at some point in my life, I did forgive, but I think there's some parts of my heart that still need to continue that place of forgiving. So, and it's a very real thing. It's not just a one and done thing, but it's like, how am I entering into the space of forgiving? But when he said that, he said, like, you can't be healed if you don't forgive. Like, that is one of the impediments.
Absolutely. I think that's actually where I was going with the next chapter of this.
Oh, like, perfect. It's like I knew.
Yeah. The next thing that we need to talk about is bringing this to a personal level. But first, I think there's that need to say, we're living in a world that has tried to eliminate the need for mercy by allowing everything.
Yeah.
If everything is okay, possible kind of behavior that you can imagine is okay, then mercy seems unnecessary. But what happens when somebody does something that is truly not acceptable?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're living in a world that has eliminated the need for mercy, and yet the need for mercy has suddenly presented itself, and we've forgotten how to be merciful. We're living in a world that has so wildly accepted just insanity that if we can accept all of these things, then how do we ever forgive anything? And then you have people who are not only not willing to forgive, but who don't know that they themselves can be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have people living in fear. That idea, I can't be forgiven, leads me to be afraid. I'm afraid now that I'm going to be known or I'm going to be found out. And if I'm afraid that I'm going to be found out, then I'm going to live defensively. And if I'm going to live defensively, then that means that every single encounter that I have, it has a wall in it. There's always some kind of a barrier. There's always some kind of something that is preventing me from really being in a relationship with you. So if I'm always afraid that somebody's going to find out what I said or that I've thought this way, if I'm always afraid that my past actions are going to come back because I don't believe that I can be forgiven, then in every encounter, I'm always already starting from a place of division. And I'm not starting from a place of openness or unity. God's plan for us is very different. But if we don't even realize that part of it, if we don't even realize that part of the story, then we can't even start the conversation about receiving mercy and being forgiven. We just have to know, first of all, that our world desperately needs mercy.
Right.
A lot of the division that we experience and we see in so many different things, the beginning of healing is just recognizing our need for mercy.
Yeah.
The beginning of healing is recognizing that people can, in fact, change.
Yeah.
Now, that change takes time, and that change has to happen, and that's where accountability comes in.
So I knew one thing that was very powerful for me, which I had to be asked to do, was allowing myself to get justly angry.
Yes.
This actually had to precede my act of forgiving, because I needed to acknowledge and admit that my dignity in some way had been like abused, trampled, like whatever you want to call it. Like it had, like I just wasn't being treated according to the dignity that was given to me by God. And this other person or people didn't treat me in that way. And it took me a while to, one, acknowledge that, because that was like, I was like a pit in my stomach. Like, what do you mean? Like they've been treated, like I know them, like this is personal. So once I was able to be in a place where I recognized my dignity and I recognized that what had happened to me was unjust, I got angry about it. And like God wanted that. He goes, no, understand this, but not for the sake of being angry, because then I directed it to the Lord. And it was just like a release of recognition. Like, okay, here's a safe place to like accept that this is what I'm feeling. I place it with the Lord, but then I can go back to this person, because as I experience that anger, the Lord consoled my heart.
Yeah. I mean, anger is a legitimate emotion, right?
Yes.
You're allowed to feel it, and you're going to feel it. But again, we're living in a world that suggests that, maybe especially in the Catholic context, a lot of people operate under the idea that if they're angry, they're doing something wrong.
Right.
That they're never supposed to be angry, because that's not what mercy looks like. But in fact, to be angry simply means to understand that something has happened that's wrong.
Right.
Now, anger can be misdirected. Anger can be misidentified,
right.
where we can abuse the anger that we feel. We can be unjustified in feeling anger, so we're angry about the wrong thing.
Yeah.
That's all very possible. But if you feel angry, the best thing to do is to admit that you feel angry.
Right. And to do it to the Lord. I think that's the thing, because you can take that and bring it back to the person who probably had caused you this harm, or this group of people, however it is that you kind of channel it. The proper place and the safest place to do this is with the Lord. Like he can handle every emotion. He's aware of it. But then because you're in that space with the Lord, you experience his mercy. You experience this touch of consolation from him. And when you go back to the other person, you're able to, you're coming from a place that is more grounded, not in simply yourself, but in the person of Jesus. And you're able to extend that forgiveness. And that's part doesn't mean you do it perfectly every time. No, like, that's why we have the box to go to confession to. But to know that it is okay to get justly angry, but do it with the Lord first. And
well, and that comes back to what you were asking before about accountability and mercy.
Yeah.
Anger allows us to hold someone accountable, but mercy requires that holding them accountable does not mean the ultimate penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Our world tends to go to extremes.
Yes. Yeah.
As a society, we tend to go to extremes. So accountability means both telling somebody that they're wrong and condemning them forever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what we are.
No, it's not.
And we're not meant to be that way. And the human person is meant for something more than that. And so the reason that we're seeing these divisions and everything right now is because we're not being true to who we are as human beings. We're so quick to the ultimate condemnation that we neglect the growth potential and the possibility for change that exists in the human heart, because human beings are able to change.
You know what I also think? I think it's because we're trying to do, how do we form this? We're all sons and daughters of God the Father. And like the Lord in scripture says, like, the Lord disciplines those whom he loves. We're acting outside of this fatherhood, this authority with God. So then we're doing it to each other. You ever see your siblings fight?
No, I've never seen siblings fight. I don't have a little brother who I beat time when I was a little kid.
It's horrible.
But it's horrible. But at the same time, the only fight that I've ever been in was when a kid who lived in our neighborhood went after my brother.
Oh.
I was like, no, I get to fight with him. I get to attack him. I get to jump on him and punch him and stuff. You don't get to do that. The only kid I ever had a fight with.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a fight. It was just like I knocked him down and that was it. The only fight I ever got in my entire life.
Oh, that's good.
Was because somebody was fighting with my brother. But like,
I have family members, but let's just say I can't go into details with those because that involved police involvement. But yeah, so
we have different backgrounds.
Yeah, we listen. I come from the hood in Stanford. You come from Strat City, so
Strat City.
It's because that's how you called it, aka Stratford.
Yes.
I was only thinking that because it was just like, when you have this authority or this recognition, like I know how to act because of my relationship to like my parental authority.
Sure.
But how much of the church, I mean, not the church, the world doesn't even live under the authority of God. But I did want to bring up St. Josephine Bakhita. Because this is great. The most perfect example of going through the atrocities of the slavery at the time. She was born in Darfur, and then her village was ransacked by a bunch of pirates, and then she got torn away from her family, was sold into slavery, spent a couple times, a few years in the Middle East, then finally ended up in Italy. Now, when she was in the Middle East, on one of the people, the slave owners, they had this practice where they would take a knife, cut into the body in order to make designs, and then pour salt over it so that it would heal and scar over. So her whole body had been marked, saying like, actually, you're my property. Right. You don't belong to anyone else. Then found her way in Italy as a nanny because there was a wealthy Italian who would do business and trade and was like, hey, I have a daughter. Why doesn't she come over and help? This poor woman, like the Italians at this time had never seen a black woman. They were just so scared of her. They called her the Black Devil. Like it was just horrible. There's a beautiful movie, Bakhita. It's 3 hours. It's Italian, but it is gorgeous. And it would just like, it's going to make you cry. Gift of tears. And she has every right to be angry. Right. Every right to say like, my life was not what it was supposed to be. Now her name was given Bakhita when she was a slave, which means lucky one. And as she spent time in Italy, she got to know the Catholic faith. she saw this in the movie. I love this part of the movie. It's one of my favorite. She finds sanctuary in the church because the villagers are just like coming at her. They're really upset with her. She's starting to get a liking among the children, and the villagers don't want their children to have any relationship with this black woman. And so she hides in the sanctuary where no one can come and get her. And she sees Jesus on the cross. And she's familiar with this image because she has seen and witnessed crucifixions. It was still happening, and it still does in the area when she was a slave. And so she wondered, what did this man do that he deserved to be on the cross? And the priest was able to catechize her and explain to her who God is. And you see this moment where her life story connected with a God who was on a cross, who knew what suffering was. And she has this beautiful quote that I wanted to read out loud. And she says, "If I were to meet the slave traders who kidnapped me and even those who tortured me, I would kneel and kiss their hands, for if that did not happen, I would not be a Christian today." St. Paul says, God works together for the good of those who love him. So to be in relationship with God, that every moment of suffering or inconvenience can be brought, God will bring out a greater good. And I loved how she talks about her scars, because she was when I was a missionary, we had patron saints for our colleges. So we got broken up into different groups. And one summer, my patron saint that summer was Bakita. And I really needed Bakita that summer. God just knew that this was the woman to stalk and pray for me. And I got really close to her, especially with regard to suffering and knowing how to understand it. And because I was on the side where why did this have to happen to me? Or why do I have to have this? And Bakita was yeah, that was that. But look what God can do in the midst of your suffering, and look what he desires to do. Because now she no longer, even her image of her own scars, now she saw them reflected as I get to share in Jesus' suffering. I'm scarred like him. They're beautiful now. Rather than as a place of shame, they had now become a thing of beauty. So there's a lot from Bakita that we can learn about healing, forgiveness, but also, again, huge, she lived slavery. She did.
She was literally a slave.
She was literally a slave.
But found freedom.
Yeah.
And in her conversion, not just conversion, because it wasn't just about becoming Catholic. It was about falling in love with Christ and then dedicating the rest of her life to the Lord as a religious sister, living her entire life for this merciful God that she had encountered. And I think that's really where people can change. People can be transformed.
Yeah.
We want people to change always for the better. We don't want people to change and get worse.
No, exactly.
We don't want people to change and people who used to be good suddenly become bad. We don't want people who used to have good habits to suddenly develop bad habits and start to hurt themselves and others. We want people to change for the good, but we need to be ready to celebrate the change for the good. So when we see somebody who once did something a different way, to celebrate that they have changed. Today, the first reading at Mass is the conversion of Saul. And I love Ananias in that scene. So,
he was but why?
Yeah. Ananias is this Christian living in Damascus who is told by the Lord to go to Saul, who has met Jesus.
So in a way, Ananias canceled Saul.
Well, but there's a beauty to what Ananias says. But Lord, I've heard about this man, and this is what he does. Ananias is confessing his own fear.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to go. If I go, he's going to throw me in jail. He's going to put me in chains.
He might kill me.
Lord, are you sure that this is what I'm supposed to do? I don't understand. It's Ananias seeking to understand more. And then God says to him, go. For Saul is going to be the instrument of the conversion of many souls. Saul is going to bring many to my name. And Ananias goes, prays over him, heals him of his blindness, and then baptizes him. Immediately, Saul gets up and is baptized. Who did it? Ananias baptized him. And then we never hear about Ananias ever again. But he's the key figure in the whole thing. Yes, I know the Lord appears to Saul on the road.
So cool, but
and
he made
himself
available.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he wasn't afraid to share his own fear with the Lord. He wasn't afraid to acknowledge the problem,
Yeah.
which was that Saul was a vicious persecutor of the church, breathing murderous threats against the believers.
Right.
Ananias named it.
Yeah.
This is what Saul does, and it's wrong, and it's bad. It's dangerous for me. Are you sure I'm supposed to go?
Mm-hmm.
But then Saul becomes this great preacher of the faith. And what do we hear? All they knew was, all the other Christian communities knew, was that the one who formerly had been persecuting them now believed in the name and was now preaching the name.
I can't imagine
And
what
they
it was like.
rejoiced.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to be able to give people that chance to change.
Yeah. I want to, okay. So been doing a little bit of Nicomachean ethics, things from Aristotle. And so some of the sections at the moment that I'm on is his understanding of, like, we're on virtue and that it's the mean between two vices and all of that. Specifically, the one that had come up that I want to talk about is magnanimity and pusillanimity. These are fun words to say.
Pusillanimity?
Pusillanimity. No, pusillanimity.
Pusill.
No, Pulo? Pullin. See, that's a tongue twister. Wait, no. I think I'm correct.
I got
Pusillanimity. It's Pull. See, now we got it. Magnanimity. The magnanimous person.
Pusillanimity.
Pusillanimity.
Yeah.
And an anemone.
A lack of courage or determination, timidity.
Okay, you were always going to get there. All right. So my point, whatever, what to say for magnanimity. Anyways, my point is, in the Christian sense, there's a lot of it is based on, like, thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Pusillanimity.
Pusil. Pusillanimity.
Whatever. It's a hard word. Guys, have fun trying to pronounce this word. But it's a good thing to add to your vocabulary. So anyways,
It's a good SAT word.
It's a great SAT word. So magnanimity and the other word that Father Sam said correctly are really important for the Christian life. And magnanimity is expressed as living excellence, but stepping up to the plate when you need to. Despite the fear or the situation that's there, are you a person who is willing to step up and answer the call to be excellent? So Ananias really had to make a decision. Now, what's beautiful about this is you have these two, I can't say the word, pusillanimity.
You got it.
Pusillanimity? No.
Pusillanimity.
Pusillanimity.
Yeah.
Say that 10 times fast.
Pusillanimity.
What Aristotle says is that when it comes to character, at the end of the day, like, yes, you have your feelings, you have your states, but it's actually about your choice. And it's your choices that really kind of defined what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's the fact that you actually can choose. So those who have, like, bravery or all these qualities that are seen as, like, good characters, they can be habitually chosen.
Yeah.
So that, like, I can grow in the virtue of magnanimity by choosing to step up to things to be and to live out excellence. Or if I do enough actions, which is the vice of pusillanimity, dang, I got it. Which is a fear, and so I just act in cowardice and I don't step up. I'd rather just shy away from it. Oh, look, he gave you a thumbs up.
That's good.
Thanks, Chris. Like, I'm shying away from an opportunity where God wants, to use me.
Right.
But just because you're stepping into magnanimity doesn't mean, like, it's because you're going to do it perfectly the first time, but it's like, I'm making myself available to be formed in this, but also, like, because Ananias was courageous in that.
He was extremely courageous.
Yeah.
So the guys on Catholic Stuff You Should Know, we're talking about something kind of similar.
Okay.
So if Aristotle stops at part of being human is living this way, there's a component that he's missing because he doesn't know God.
He doesn't, but he knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, but he's on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Catholic understanding would develop that to be not just that we have to be true to our human nature or something, but that we have to be true to the desire of the human heart. And the human heart ultimately, in the end, is made to seek and search for God.
So that's the one thing Aristotle does say is what characterizes humans different from like the animals, because the human person can reason. Then you have that. Then I know like Aquinas took him and was
Right.
like, let's just continue this, and like
we get then to that next point of that desire. Well, the desire, magnanimity, corresponds correctly to the desire of the human heart.
mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to be a loser. Nobody wants to be a coward. Nobody wants to run away from stuff. People want to be heroic. They want to be the one who stood strong.
Like why we like Marvel movies.
Yeah, they want to be the one who was able to rise to the occasion. So there was a guy who was in seminary with, and he would he left as his voicemail. If you ever called his room and he wasn't there, just leave me a message. Have a magnanimous day.
Oh, that's so cool.
Rise to the occasion today.
Yeah.
Step up. Don't be afraid. Virtuously, courageously step forward and do the hard thing. Do the right thing. Do the good thing.
Do the hard.
There's something really beautiful about that.
So forgiveness and mercy, that is hard.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to bring it back to. It's like, this is the hard thing. But it's also a choice, you know?
It's a hard thing. I don't just want to stop it. It's something difficult, though. I want to make sure that it's so clear that it's the most necessary thing.
The most excellent thing that we could do.
Yeah, but it's something that we so desperately need.
Mm-hmm.
We keep seeing the world and wondering, why is it so bad, and why does it seem to be getting worse every day? It's because mercy and forgiveness are so absent.
Yeah.
If we want the world to get better, the necessary thing for us is to learn and understand mercy and forgiveness. That's where we are.
Right.
So it's the hard thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's the hard thing that starts with yourself first.
Yeah. But I think this is where we can go so many
different directions. What are we talking about next week?
Do you start at the personal level, or do you start at the big level?
I don't know.
Where I was starting at that big level and just recognizing this is where the world is, but then recognizing that the closer I get, the more I realize I need mercy.
Yeah.
I need forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And I need that both for myself, and I need to give it to others.
Yeah.
Cannot give what I do not have. We're going to talk about that next week.
Okay. That's perfect.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Hey, this was fun. I'm glad to be back.
Pusillanimity. Dang it.
Pusillanimity. Magnanimity.
Nemo.
Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo.
Hey, Paola, this is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm Father Sam Kachuba.
And I'm Paola Peña.
This is Roar Like the Lamb.